Andy Ramirez is one of the 200 miners hired by McCloskey-Houghton Corporation. The journey to the asteroid is supposed to take over 4 years, but it is suddenly disrupted when an asteroid collides with the mining vessel Borealis. Andy wakes up in his pod when the alarm suddenly goes off. His air assistant named Leonard prepares him for an immediate landing. He lands on an alien planet/asteroid, and his pod starts to malfunction. According to his air assistant, Andy needs to step out immediately. As he tries to wriggle out of his pod, his suit tears a little, and he lost a significant amount of oxygen. With only 42% oxygen remaining, Andy has to find help on an unknown planet. At this point, Andy, a musician who had taken up the challenge of becoming a space miner, is completely helpless on the alien planet. He couldn't survive all by himself, and his only hope is to find out if he could take shelter in the Borealis. On his way to the vessel, Andy notices bright lights, and he realized that another miner had survived the crash. Unlike Andy, Dwayne is somewhat aware of the steps he has to take in case the vessel crashes. Andy soon learns that his responsibilities involved running the military communication system in the Navy, and it all starts to make sense. He explains that the company has attempted to take a shortcut through an asteroid field to save fuel, and that was why the spaceship had crashed. Dwayne has turned on the SOS light and had already set up a system to send a message to Earth, which he assumes would take around 8 months to reach. He added that, for help to arrive, it would take another 1.5 years, and until then they had to conserve oxygen and find resources to keep themselves going. Just when Andy sees a ray of hope in Dwayne, he suddenly disappears. Before I proceed, kindly subscribe to this channel, click the like button and smash the notification bell to enjoy more of this. Back to the film, Andy decides to follow his initial plan, find the Borealis. On his way, he hears a woman's voice on the radio. He has repeatedly sent out messages, and his plan works. Someone who is alive has heard him on the radio. As it turns out, the woman is Naomi, a drilling supervisor who has her leg stuck in her pod. She needs help to free herself, and Andy is her only hope. Even though according to Andy's air assistant, traveling directly to the Borealis would have been quicker and safer for Andy, he chooses to take the supposedly dangerous path that leads to Naomi's pod. Dwayne can sense that there is something strange about the planet/asteroid, but he cannot put a finger on it. But soon, on his way to Naomi, he runs into a bunch of gigantic creatures. They are the inhabitants of the planet, and they clearly do not approve of humans. They chase Andy, and just when he thinks he wouldn't be able to make it to Naomi's, Dwayne shows up. Even though the creatures has been responsible for his disappearance, Dwayne somehow manages to keep himself alive. He still has 61% oxygen left, and Naomi advises Andy to assist Dwayne, and in return, he could refill his oxygen. Andy is on his way to help Dwayne when all of a sudden he sees a creature jumps on him and devours him immediately. The creatures are after Andy as well, but Naomi comes up with a brilliant idea and uses the air assistant to generate a notification sound. She has intentionally sent a comm request to every pod to distract the creatures with the noise while Andy runs for his life. Her plan works, and Andy is safe, or at least it seems so, before he discovers tiny, insect-like, deadly creatures which are equally terrifying. He has also figured that the gigantic creatures are afraid of the tiny buzzing insects, and they always kept away from them. As possibly the only humans on the alien planet, Naomi and Andy find comfort in each other's voices. They discuss their personal lives. Andy had wanted to start a music school, but after losing his wife and son to an accident, he gave up on his dream and ended up embarking on a radically different path. Andy initially did not tell Naomi the truth, perhaps because he could never accept what had happened. He wanted to imagine that his son was still alive and his wife was around. Maybe talking about them in the present tense made Andy feel a little better. Naomi regrets never having had a successful romantic relationship. Later on, when Andy faces the creatures, Naomi tries to help and guide him in any way she could. For a few minutes, she feels completely doomed when Andy announces that he has no chance of survival. The last thing he said was that he was being swallowed by a monstrous creature that lives underground, and there was no way he could make it out alive. Just when Andy is about to surrender, Naomi encourages him to think of his son, Caleb. After thinking about his son and also Naomi, the stranger who has no chance of survival without his help, Andy activates his air assistant and states he is having a heart attack, and as it is expected, the assistant prepares the defibrillator, and immediately after it was used, the monster vomits Andy out. He thanked Naomi for being there with him constantly and encouraging him not to give up. After everything he had been through, Andy is severely low on oxygen. His chances of making it to the Borealis are better than his chances of finding Naomi, but he refuses to give up. Even though they have only briefly known one another, they have become each other's only hope. However, Andy's determination helps him make it to her pod, and he finally refills his oxygen from her and is stable. Naomi is overjoyed to see him. At one point, when she can no longer feel her leg, she has surrendered, but Andy's constant support helps her fight her negative thoughts. They decide to head to the Borealis to find out if the life support system has survived, since that is the only way they could survive on the unknown planet for over a year before help arrived from Earth. On their way to the Borealis, the creatures chase them, but thankfully they managed to seal the gates of the spaceship before the creatures could enter. The backup generator on the Borealis is working, and they are overjoyed to have an entire cargo with a stabilized atmosphere. This meant that they could survive on the alien planet, but just when Andy and Naomi are about to celebrate, they notice blood on the floor. Immediately, they notice a creature walking around the Borealis. They try to bypass it, but soon they came across another one that looks more vicious than the rest. Andy ends up locking himself and Naomi in a chamber to keep away from the monstrous creatures. They have to find a way out, even if it means facing the creatures. But Naomi is convinced there is no way they could unlock the doors and that they have no choice but to accept that at one point they would perish in that tiny room. Andy finally confesses that he had lost his family for good and he hates himself for surviving even after the sole reason for his existence is taken away from him. He desperately wants to give up on life, but somehow, it always turned out to be more difficult than he envisioned. But Naomi reminds him that without him, she would not have made it out of her pod. She motivates Andy not to lose hope. As they embraced each other, Naomi notices a handful of purple, shiny, gooey objects on Andy's back. These are the same tiny insect-like creatures that the monster stay away from. Immediately after, the monster forces its way into the chamber, but just when it is about to attack them, Naomi flings the sack of insects in the monster's direction, and both escape from the monster's grip. They manage to make it to the cargo, but the monster followed them there. Andy decided to launch one of the pods in the cargo at the monster to destroy it, but his plan was risky. His air assistant warns him about the risks involved, but Andy wants to take the chance. He regrets not doing enough to save his family from the accident since he was the one behind the wheels that night, and by helping Naomi, he hoped to redeem himself even if it means dying to save her life. By now, Naomi places some light bulb around her neck to distinguish her from the monster running after her. Andy launches the pod and successfully destroys the monstrous creature. Naomi checks on Andy immediately after his pod crashes to the floor. She is in tears begging him to come back, and Andy soon opens his eyes. He did not expect to survive, but the news of the monster's death comforts him. It is their first morning on the alien planet, and after everything they had been through in one night, they believed that they could survive as long as they had each other. The cargo would keep them going, and now that they had secured the gates of the Borealis, they hopefully would not have to face the monsters anymore, since the message Dwayne had typed out had already been sent. We can only hope that the company would send them help, even though it was going to take a long time. Andy and Naomi had started to admire each other. They held each other's hands, suggesting the birth of a romantic relationship. This is where the film ends. To enjoy more of this, kindly subscribe to this channel, click the like button and smash the notification bell. Thanks for watching.